You are listening to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where illumination and inspiration is but a click away. With so many genre topics for you on everything that you need to know in life. We celebrate and share the people who have taken the journey before you and who are now here to serve you with their wisdom and their knowledge. The next show coming up is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sensual Expressions right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sara Troy, and my guest today is, oh wow, hot stuff I can tell you, is the wonderful Jennifer Elizabeth Masters with, hold on for it, Happy Marriage, Holy Sex. How do you get to a happy marriage? How do you have that holy sex? One to remember, one to want to go back again. Well, it's a fantasy. It's something that we would all love to have in our relationships. And somewhere along the line, whether you're still happily married or not, we're going to run into those problems where that sexual connection is not there anymore. Why is it not there? Why does there become such a barrier? Is it a trust issue? Is it a self-esteem issue? Is it a stigma? We don't know. That's why we've got her on the show, because she's going to break it down for us of why intimacy becomes such a problem in our lives and why we can't have that happy marriage, and why we really, in order to have a happy marriage, need to be liberating in our sexual life. We love to watch fantasy movies, we love to read the books, but when it actually comes to doing the deed, no. Why is that? Sex is wonderful with the right person. It is a wonderful expression of your relationship, and it's something you shouldn't deprive yourself of. So let us start looking at what are the barriers to that happy marriage. And it may not just be a marriage you're in, just a wonderful relationship. Whatever it is, we want to get to the holy sex. So welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Sex, it's a huge big word for a lot of people, isn't it? It's even in this day and age of 2019, there is still an issue around it, isn't it? Do I have too much? Do I be too promiscuous? Do I initiate it? Do I hold back? Am I worthy of it? Am I sexy enough? The whole tirade of conversations that goes around in the head before we even are willing to put ourselves out there.
The thing about sex is that we need to look at it as a form of communication. Mm-hmm. So if we're hung up with communication, if we're not communicating openly with our partners, if we are holding back about the way we feel, or here's the other one, if we don't even know what pleases us, if we don't know where our G-spot is, if we don't know how to have an orgasm on our own, how on earth can we guide and direct our partner to do so for us?
You say guide and direct. For a lot of people, it's like, oh, no, but would I be too forward in asking them to touch here or do there, or I like that? Am I being greedy? Is there too much attention on me and not enough on them? Is this coming about from society's teachings, religious teachings, upbringing teachings? Is it coming from media that's telling us that we need to be more servants to one another rather than say, this is what pleasure me?
Well, I think that this has been going on for generations, mm-hmm. where, from my viewpoint, we've all been men and we've all been women. So mm-hmm. when I say that women have been designed to pleasure men, to be available for men's pleasure, believe me, I'm not a man hater. Mm-hmm. That is not, but it's been society. It's been the way it was set up for us. And here we are, we tend to look at men as that there's something bad or wrong with them because they are wired and I've heard it said that men are wired to spray and pray. Now, what does that mean? It means that men were wired for procreation. That's what they were wired for, to keep the human race on the planet. That's what men were designed for. We can't ask them to be different than their wiring. Mm-hmm. And women, because I know I am one, We have a tendency to look at men and wish and hope that they were like us.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth of the matter is, most women think they know what they want but don't, because when you give them what they want, they're disappointed. And I've seen it because I've coached thousands of women. I've seen it across the board. The minute their man does what they say they want, they're pissed off and angry with them.
Why?
Well, because the truth is that they think they want something, and that's not what they want.
How do they go about knowing what they want if they're in, if they're new at this, or they've been with one partner for so long and, 20 years, 30 years in a relationship, and now they're now single and embarking out again? I mean, for a lot of people, as you said, they don't know what they want. How do they explore that?
So the bottom line is, we need to get to know ourselves. And we were not trained to do that.
Oh,
When
no, it's dirty, taboo. What are you doing under those blankets?
it's selfish
Mm.
we're called selfish, and no one wants to be considered selfish.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just sexually to know what you like and where your erogenous zones are. It's more than that. It's, who are you?
Yeah.
And the tendency is, for a lot of us, the bitch side of us tends to come up, and we say no faster than we say yes. And this is what I've seen historically, and I have done it too, where my husband wanted to have sex, and I was too tired. The kids were this and that, and maybe he did something I didn't like this week or last week, and I'm holding on to resentment. And in that place, that's all ego stuff. And when we're in our small self, the big ego, then we have a tendency to say no when we really mean yes. We say no, and then we end up laying awake hours later, angry and pissed off with ourselves because we didn't say yes. And if we'd made love, we would have had that wonderful connection with our man or woman, whichever the case may be. And we would have been asleep, snuggling together, so this is the thing, is that we have to say yes more often than we say no. And if we even tend to want to say no, we need to ask ourselves why am I standing in my own way of pleasure, of receiving pleasure? Why?
Can you receive pleasure if you're in a relationship where you don't feel valued?
Well, that's a tough one. Yes, and no. So, coming to a place of self-love is the key ingredient to a happy relationship and having holy sex. And I want to touch on this because here's the thing. We haven't been all programmed and trained that when we get an education, we'll get a good job and make lots of money and be happy, and then we'll get married and then we'll be happy. Well, those are not things that bring us happiness. We are responsible for our own happiness. So no matter how someone else is valuing or not valuing, we need to value ourselves. We need to fill our love bucket, our love tank ourselves. Because we have this tendency to think, the princess movies, all, to think that some person is going to rescue us. And when we're looking for that rescue, so there's that victim triangle. So 1 minute they're the rescuer, the next minute they're the perpetrator, and the next minute they're the victim. We don't want a rescuer. We think we do, but it puts us in a victim triangle that we cannot get out of. That we don't want that. And so we're not the damsel in distress. We are the powerhouse. And so getting to know ourselves is our responsibility. Getting to know how we can have an orgasm is our responsibility. And I know lots of women, because I've talked to thousands of them, many women don't masturbate. And there are many women that will die never having an orgasm if they don't learn to do it on their own. We have to be able to relax enough to let go, because that's what happens when we have an orgasm. We can't hang on. And I write about that in the preface. If you're hanging on to the window ledge of life, you will not have an orgasm.
Right. But I mean, you're talking about people placing, value on themselves. And so many people, as you said, easy to say, oh God, not tonight. I'm too tired. I've got work, I've got the kids, I've got this and that. I just don't feel like it. And of course, if you did make love, it's such a beautiful release of tension. And as you see, bringing each other together, it's a lovely equilibrium. If you're in a space in your life where you feel you can express what you need, or that you can place some other value or time on yourself to de-stress. Not everybody can make love to themselves, where there's screaming pitch at the kids or something going wrong, or at a soccer match with them or whatever. There's so much happens in marriage with a breakdown, a lack of communication, where they're overstressed and overworked and over this. And you start seeing relationships just dividing, splitting apart instead of coming together because they don't make time for it. Is this something right in the beginning with a relationship you need to be right up front and say, there is this time for us, there is this time for ourselves, and then there's this time for our family? Is that the only way that you can really actually keep the balance?
I think the relationship needs to be a priority. And my sense is that once we have children, we make them the priority and we forget about the relationship. And so the relationship lacks importance. It's low on the totem pole, and that's the problem. And yet, what we all as a society need to focus on, kids need two parents. They don't need one parent. And I know, because I did it myself, and I'm honest about this, is that I kept thinking, well, you're hardly doing this, you're hardly participating, you're hardly spending time with the children, so I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to divorce you. And the end result is children of divorce are more likely to get divorced. They're more likely to be in a life of crime. They're more likely to be depressed. They're more likely to commit suicide. We need to be more focused on the whole unit.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we need to get over our fat, ugly egos and love ourselves and accept ourselves and our partner and be committed, and not make divorce the subject of conversation. It's the commitment instead. Yes. My son just got married this past weekend, and he had me speak at his ceremony, which, if you know my history, I've been married and divorced 4 times. Now, here am I talking about all these things because I know I've been there. I had lots of abuse in my childhood. And so my environment created a brokenness in me. Mm-hmm. And I was constantly looking for that fix. And the bottom line is that fix is within.
Yes.
And a divorce isn't going to give it to you. You've got to give it to you. And so commitment to yourself, to the marriage, is paramount. The other thing I will say is that the spiritual community has really done us a disservice by thinking that there's no conflict in a good marriage, that there's only one person out there for you, and it's utter. Can I say it? It's bullshit.
Right.
It's not true.
Yeah. There are so many different type of soul connections and physical connections. I mean, yes, it's just, how do they fit into your life? Is it long term? Is it short term? But yes.
So the bottom line, though, is we have to be responsible for ourselves and our own pleasure. And we can't make our orgasm someone else's problem. We can understand what it is we want and need. Read this book. It will guide you.
Orgasm for Life, for those that are just listening.
Orgasm for Life will teach you exactly where the parts are, how to do what. And women, because of this wiring, we are beautifully created to fit together beautifully, a man and woman. And I'm not discounting other relationships, but as a straight woman, and that's what this book is about, I don't discount other relationships. But the point is that we have to know what it is we like. and then we can lovingly tell our partner, as opposed to, you're not doing it for me.
Yeah.
There's a kind way to ask, could you please do this for me?
Right.
But typically speaking, women need 40 minutes. And not every woman that is that way, but most women need 40 minutes. We are like the crock pots. They're
Yeah,
slow
slow cooking. It's
to
the
warm up.
Pointer Sisters, remember? I need a man with slow hands, with the soft touch. Yes,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's like wind us up slowly. Believe me, you'll get a bigger crescendo.
And here's the thing, is that we all, men and women, are all capable of multi-orgasms. We all are. So the slower that we go, and when we stop, we pull back, we kind of change positions, do something different, maybe feed each other a few juicy strawberries and massage each other for a little bit. Change what you're doing so that you can extend the lovemaking session from more than 10 minutes to over an hour. When we do, it's better for the man, because then the energy can move up, not just staying in the genitals, but moving up into the heart, and then into the third eye. This is where this multi-orgasmic sex can happen for both sexes, both genders. It's available for all of us, but it can't be over in 2 or 5 minutes.
Kind of somewhat of a tantra, really, building
Yes.
it up until really it becomes a spiritual connection that transcends the body, which is a wonderful etheric place to be if you allow both of you to take that journey. And as you said, multiple orgasms for a guy, he may come faster for the first round, and then he can pay more attention on you, and you can have multiple orgasms, and another orgasm is going to come from him. But the willingness to make the time, to spend the time, to it's a de-stressor for each other. It's a wonderful way to communicate when sometimes the words don't do it. But it's getting to that person that is willing to do that. And if, your son is lucky because he's got a mum that can warn him right at the beginning of the relationship, remember to communicate. But how, you went for it 4 times before you got there. So this would be so wonderful if it was something that was maybe taught in school, taught in families, so that kids knew about it right from the word go. It's not the wham bang thank you man, it's not on the notch, it's not about the scoring. It's about when the woman really is happy, when she's really reached that orgasm, the men have along the way, and the etheric state of being they're going to get, they can't get from anything else. There is no drug, there isn't anything else that can give them that etheric pleasure of communication and connection that having a wonderful orgasm together can do. But it's how do we get people to understand that at the beginning of the relationship when they're youthful, and not like realizing a breakdown in the relationship and then needing the counseling, or it leads to divorce and then goes back into the second partner where better. We want to stop that cycle, don't we? We want to try and get it right the first time.
Right. I just interviewed, before I did my speech for my son's wedding, I interviewed a man who has been married for 74 years.
Wow.
And that's the longest marriage that I've ever witnessed. And he's the father of my next door neighbor. His wife just passed away at 101.
Wow.
And so I asked him, I said, well, what guidance would you give to a young couple getting married today? And the biggest thing that he said was to sleep naked, not wear pajamas, or as you would say, Sarah, not wear pajamas, not wear underwear, don't wear
a nightie.
don't wear a nightie, because it's armor. It is protective armor. And he said, it's okay. You hear that, don't go to bed angry. But he said, it's okay to go to bed angry. But if you're naked in the bed together, through the night, you're eventually going to touch one another. And when you wake up in the next morning, make love before you get out of bed, so that anger will dissolve, because humans need touch.
Yeah.
And that anger it's like a pushing away
Mm.
when we're angry with the other person. And typically the thing that we're angry about has nothing to do with our partner. It has more to do with us in our childhood. It's our
Mm.
little inner child screaming at us for attention. And so that's why I promote this self-love, healing the past, healing whatever trauma you had from your childhood. We've all had it. And so when we work through those things together, and if we commit to one another, please call me on my stuff. When you see that I'm making a statement that you know isn't true, call me out on it
Mm.
lovingly, redirect me. Now, I just did this with my daughter, and you're going to say, well, what does this have to do with sex? I'm not having sex with my daughter. I want to just make that perfectly clear. But we were at this wedding. It was a 5-day affair in Michigan, and my daughter has a tendency to kind of call me out publicly and sort of in a harsh, critical way. And so
Mm.
before we got together, I said, can we have a pact? She's a beautiful spiritual being, beautiful girl. I said, instead of criticizing me, if you see me about to do or say something that you know I shouldn't, instead of saying something negative, say, I love you, Mom. And over the course of the weekend, I must have heard, I love you, Mom, 30 times. And I was kind of chuckling to myself that I felt so loved. And
Mm.
although she was calling me out, it was done in such a loving way that I didn't feel put upon.
Yes.
So if we have a gentle way to call our spouse or partner out, instead of saying, you SOB,
Mm. Yeah.
that never feels good.
No.
So have rules of engagement that you never call each other names because it's hurtful. And
And it stays, doesn't it? It
it
sticks.
does.
Mm.
And we hear the sticks and stones may break my, no,
Mhm.
it stays.
Yes.
We're sensitive beings, men and
Mhm.
women, we all are. So be kind and compassionate. You'll find you'll have a lot more lovemaking sessions if you're kind and compassionate and listen to your partner.
Can you repair a relationship that has gone so far wrong?
Yes. Yes.
I'm admit I'm divorced. My relationship got there really that my husband just didn't like me. So I was shutting further and further down. And of course, the sex was a duty for me. I didn't say no, I did it out of duty, thinking that was, what I had to do. Appease him, make sure he's happy, then I'm going to be safe. That's where I was at. How do you fix that and bring that back together, especially if the other person doesn't believe there's anything wrong on their side, that it's always you?
Well, the thing of it is that we are individuals always,
Mm-hmm.
even though we're in a relationship one-on-one. Each person has to take responsibility for their own part
Mm-hmm.
in the relationship. But here's the thing, and I'm feeling a lot in my throat. So the throat chakra has so much to do with lovemaking. It has to do with communication of what we want. It has to do with communication of what we don't want. But it also has to do with listening. So if your throat chakra isn't active, completely open, then it could be that you're either not able to hear what the other person is saying. So it's really important to try really hard to make eye contact when they're speaking to you, to
Mm-hmm.
listen, because there's always something that we each are responsible for. And did you find yourself needing to love yourself more? Was that part of the relationship healing for you?
I just eventually, eventually it was me in my own self-discovery because I had lost me completely.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I had to take the journey to discover who I was and raise my frequency up, raise my vibration up. And, then basically what he said, he had lost me when I rose. But what he had before was control. So he didn't look upon it as a relationship. He just looked at it as a woman that he had in control, and he lost the control. So I think sometimes you look at a relationship and go, okay, we came together under a different illusion. and we could not rise together, and maybe both of us were wanting something different out of it, and we never connected. And I think sometimes you do have to call that quits instead of beating the same horse. I had another relationship after that, short-lived, but when it came to the sensuality of the etheric connection, best I've ever had in my life. Right? But it didn't mean it was a sustainable relationship. It was just there. And I think it was there to remind me that I'm a sensual woman. Yes. It was that way of liberation, of opening up that door. I'm still single now.
Yes. You needed, you got what you needed at that time.
Yes.
And I would agree. Now, when you were talking about that relationship, that sometimes we come together with someone because where we're at.
Yes.
At the time that we meet.
Yeah.
And then we grow beyond, and they don't want to grow, or they're not interested in growth.
Two separate paths.
Yes, and so people, you know, come together to show us what we need to work on, and sometimes that's it, and then it dissolves.
Yes.
And sometimes they come in for a lifetime, but reason, season, lifetime, and we have to know when to let go. And so
but that's also part of placing love on yourself, isn't it? When you know that you can no longer be under that foot, and you know, and that the only way to rise up from it is to come from out of it and place that value and that love on yourself. And if you want someone to love you, then you have to show them how to love you within the love of yourself. And if you don't have that love of yourself, you're going to get, if you know somebody's not treating you right, it's because you're not treating you right, right?
Right. And that comes down to the, you know, we talked at the very beginning about how sex initially could be over very quickly.
Yes.
That we don't ask for women, that we don't ask for what we want, and that we're only out for the man's pleasure. And we're so concerned with pleasing that other person. So that comes of codependency. And when we move out of codependency, we become self-actualized or enlightened, and then, you know, we're coming into a place of wholeness. We feel whole. Then we're more able to speak to, you know, I love you, and I love when you do this. Could you do this for me? Or could you touch me in this way? Or could you do this with this finger and that with your tongue? You know, we just have to have the fluidity to be able to ask gently and lovingly for what we want, as opposed to blaming the other person for doing a lousy or sloppy job.
And, you know, when they have hit that spot, and tell them, this is it. This is it. So sometimes you won't even have to ask them the next time. And they know where to go. You know, you've already kind of, quote, given them the permission. You've told them not how you feel about that. Obviously, they can see how you're reacting to it. So, you know, becomes sometimes almost, I think, the silence between you. It speaks volumes.
Interesting. We're on the same path here, Sarah. So when a woman becomes silent, that's usually when she's in the groove. Don't disturb her. Don't change what you're doing. Keep the same pace and the same rhythm, because she's nearly there.
Yes. And, you know, there has been conversation with men. Well, if I'm not getting it off, you know, what pleasure am I get at pleasuring a woman? Well, we know that if you're pleasuring a woman, everything within you is rising, because it's beyond the ejaculation at that point, isn't it? It becomes that spiritual, etheric type feeling, as you say, up to the third eye, that transcendence of being. And whether you orgasm again or not, you are orgasming spiritually, if not physically, as a man, with the woman, because it's just you're caught in that beautiful rhythmic vibration that just carries you both.
So the thing I want to touch on when you talk about ejaculation, so both women and men can ejaculate, but men can also have an orgasm without ejaculating. And, you know, the Chinese believe, and there are many cultures that believe, that every time that a release of sperm and ejaculate happens, that you're diminishing life force. And so the goal in Tantra is you're making love without focusing on the end goal or the end game, or, you know, the orgasm. And And so you just continue to raise your vibration, and your sexual crescendo is
Mm-hmm.
rising within you both. And if you are able to sustain that energy for beyond an hour, then men can have a non-ejaculatory orgasm where they still feel the
Yeah.
sensation. And there's this, it can be a skin orgasm, an entire physical body orgasm. So there's, in my book, I talk about, this book, Orgasm for Life, I talk about, there's so many, I think there's 11 different types of orgasm that a woman can have, and men as well. I think it's 10. So it's not just one type of orgasm,
Yeah.
and most people are only used to having one type.
Right.
And there are so many others that and I instruct you very carefully on how to touch those other places so that you can have multiple orgasms, and it's not just a 10-minute roll in the hay.
Right.
It's a visceral, sensual, and spiritual experience.
The reason why I call this show a sensual experience rather than sexual ones is because I believe that you need to be in your sensuality before your sexuality. When all of the senses come alive, you can start the whole lovemaking process, through the day with little notes to each other, little texts to each other. At home, you're feeding the kids, you're doing everything else, the little touches here and there. It's all that building up the expectation of what is to come. And it's not then kind of jumping into bed, wow, wow, wow. It's about the building up, taking it to the next level and the next level. And if you can do that, as you say, it transcends, the crescendo of it. It is something, if you're willing to experience it, then is mind-blowing. It really is. But I think the art of making love isn't just in the bedroom. It's throughout the day, through maybe you decide not to do it for a few days. It's the building up of it, and the loving messages and the little this and that. I think that's the sensuality of tapping into all of our senses before we actually get there. It heightens everything.
Absolutely. Women actually make love with their brains first and body second. So if you want to turn a woman on, you're absolutely right, Sarah. We need to have our mind blown first.
Yes.
And there's lots of ways we can do that. And we've all been in relationships where they were purely sexual, where the only time touch happened was as a prelude to sex, and it's not pleasant, because then we feel like an object.
Yes.
And we're more than objects. We're human, and we have feelings, and mind, body, spirit needs to all be included. And we could swim during the day naked and not make love, and then make love after dinner, or you go out for dinner and tell your partner you're not wearing panties. There's a lot of ways to add excitement to your life by doing things differently.
I think it's also your dialogue. Don't send her a note, I want to fuck you tonight. That's not the turn on. I think it's also becomes an exploration of what words can you use. How can you say something that that's going to be a turn on for her? That's going to be an invitation. Because if you say the wrong thing, shut down. I didn't like that, right? So I think for a man, where it's, he's used to perhaps just doing it one way, this is a wonderful journey that he can take of, what is going to get her to rise up, what is going to be the turn on, an exploration of their own verbiage, their own little ways of doing things. And I think that's something that is a discovery for them as well, if they're willing to take the journey.
Well, I would like to touch on the mature relationship, because I think that typically what happens if we go along where sex is perfunctory, it is short, and the woman doesn't have an orgasm, and that happens over a long period of time. If you are still married 20 years down the road, you could end up like so many of my clients, where sex happens maybe once every 3 months.
Yeah.
And so it's very important. And the statistics are the proof. 40% of women are having challenges with orgasms. And there's, at the beginning of this book, there's a direct sex survey, which talks about the statistics. And this is something, I've got to find my glasses here. I think they're under a cat.
Yes, a dog under the blanket over there, a cat over here.
I'm gonna have to find another pair of glasses because my kitty is on top of that pair. But it's so important for women to have an orgasm. If you want to have sex long term, you better make sure she's having regular orgasms, or she's gonna not want to have sex with you later on.
Well, physically, literally dry up, right?
Yeah. So 10% of women never have orgasms. 40% of women have some sort of sexual dysfunction. 28% of men fake orgasms. 80% of women fake orgasms over 50% of the time. And the reason that happens is often because women are not getting there, then they just want it over. And they figure, I'm not going to have an orgasm. Let's just, let's end it. So they pretend to have the orgasm so their partner does too.
Right. When Harry met Sally, right?
Yeah.
It's just puff, and then, done. And get on with watching TV, more stimulating. That's exactly, where it goes. I think just as important as it is as putting food on the table, the roof over your head, the communication between people in a relationship has to be forefront, has to be there. And you also have to understand sex is a communication. It's the bodies communicating. It's the souls and the spirits communicating. It doesn't need words at that point. It's already a language of its own. But if you don't feed it, right, it's going to go by the wayside. But it's so easy in relationships for complacency to step in, and losing that communication, and that other priorities taking place. And it's something I think that people need to know right at the beginning, whether you're starting again at an older age or whether you're starting right at the beginning, that communication in your relationship has to be right up there at the top.
It does. And more than that, it's an honoring of one another. And revering one another. And if we're nagging and complaining about our partner, we're not respecting them, and we're not honoring.
No.
So one of the things that I'll tell you about complaining, we tend to complain when we take people for granted.
Yes.
And so it's much more important and imperative that we appreciate our partner, that we have gratitude for them, and focus on the good as opposed to magnifying the negative.
And we talk about the little notes, to this and that, but the appreciation, I think, because you're a mother, you know what it's like when you've got the kids. They are 24/7, and you've maybe got work as well, and there's food on the table and a house to clean, and what you need servicing too, and it's, if the partner works alongside of you, and again, as they're alongside of you, the touch, the hand at the base of the back, the little things along the way, which doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go and have sex now, but just as that I'm there for you, because you've got to understand that sexual conversation, that's your language between the two of you. No one else can have that language. That's your special language.
It's a look, it's a smile, it's a hand hold, a hug. There's so many different forms of non-sexual touch that are so necessary. And when we are not having sex with our partners, all of that falls away, because the focus is on no contact, not having sex. I mean, I just got off the phone with my client this morning. It's like he gets up in the morning, he and his wife leave, and there's no kiss, there's no touch, there's no hug. And that is not a marriage.
How can you have intimacy if you don't have connection?
No.
Let's look at Anxiety, one of the big things that we've covered in all of our shows right now, and especially in North America, with everything that's going on and the insecurity that's going on, anxiety is extremely high. Stress is extremely high. And yet that can be an intimacy killer. How do people get around that? Because, of course, it's a wonderful way to de-stress. But if you really are wound up and you're, very anxious, very stressed, or even borderline depressed, how do you even get to a point of wanting to be intimate or pleasing
Well,
yourself?
well, anxiety is caused by focusing on the future, putting our energy out there somewhere else. And there's a couple of things that can shift it. And one is activating the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve, it starts here on the left side of the brain. It is the longest nerve in the body. It connects the heart, the lungs, all the organs, actually. And there are a lot of different ways to activate it. Deep breathing is one. And most people, and I've yet to find somebody where this is not true, people with anxiety aren't breathing properly, and they're not breathing deeply. They're breathing shallowly or barely breathing at all. And so you've got to do belly breathing, where you expand the lower belly below the navel. When you breathe in, the belly should rise. You don't want to breathe in from the diaphragm. So belly breathing, slow belly breathing. You can set your phone, so that that your alarm goes off every hour to remind yourself to breathe. Wake up in the morning and do deep breathing. But anxiety is something that can be cured with a couple of simple things. I have a program on my website. It's Overcoming Anxiety and Depression. And it's quite reasonable. It has, I think there's 14 different audios with it for $37, and it alleviates depression, anxiety, and even suicide. But I walk you through all these things, the processes. So focusing on the future creates anxiety. So you want to be in the present, breathing in, being grounded in this moment. Focusing on the past creates depression. And if you've got trauma that you haven't dealt with, if you deal with it, if you forgive everyone, that will help to relieve the depression. But there's quite a few things that I can offer you to help you with both of these. But the anxiety can be from fear. Fear of the future, fear of what's going to happen tomorrow, fear that you're not going to have enough money. And so that also comes from a lack of trust of yourself, because when you trust yourself to choose wisely, to do the right thing, and to trust the universe and the creator, that everything is happening the way it's supposed to, and that if I shift my thoughts to something positive, the universe always has my back, and boom, money shows up, because it does. It always does. Yeah. But whatever our thoughts are thinking is what we create. So we have to steer our thoughts. I use mantras so that we're focusing on positive things. I love me. My life is joyful and happy. Those types of thoughts, as opposed to something negative.
The Emoto experiment, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, the Japanese experiment from Professor Emoto. 3 rooms with 3 glasses of water. We have some commentary over there. 1 glass of water completely ignored, another glass of water given negativity and the other positivity. The glass of water ignored did not change. The water that was given all the negative literally turned black and dense. The positive water turned crystalline, and each one of those crystals could be measured as a higher frequency. We know love resonates at a higher frequency. We know that we're 70% water, and we need to rise up to be healthy and happy, right, on positive water. And that, again, what we feed is what grows. Now, there are a lot of people today with dis-ease, which is mounted to diseases, that they become clinically depressed, or there is something happening with their body that brings them down. And no amount of rational or thinking positive or anything can help them. And it's and I think a lot of that is happening to the empaths, the sensitives, because there's the bombardment of the outside coming in. And so I think before we even look at the relationships with anyone else, we need to know what that relationship is with ourselves, what it is with our environment, how we can protect ourselves, which doesn't mean closing off to everyone, but it means just resonating with people that are resonating at that higher frequency. And you're more likely then to meet somebody who's going to honor that frequency, and you'll have a better connection when you do.
I suffered from clinical depression for over 30 years, and anxiety as well. And the interesting thing was I was on Prozac for 6 months, and it did not help me. In fact, I nearly killed myself driving because I drove 3 exits past my exit and didn't even know I did.
I know 3 people have committed suicide on it. It is not a good drug.
No, so I went off it, and then I set about to change my life. And that was when I began to change my thoughts and change the way I viewed myself. And I really focused on loving me. And it is amazing to me how all of the physical illnesses that I had disappeared. Fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr, the depression and anxiety all disappeared when I began to love myself. Of course, I will say this, that often inflammation is part of depression. And so if you take care of the candida, change your diet, stop eating fast foods and processed foods, it raises your vibration. And all of these things together, it's all about raising the vibration. And so the self-love piece helps to do that. You get out of this negativity, the downward spiral. It moves you in the opposite direction, going upward.
And I think you actually start looking at life again more from that centralness. Because, you know, for me, I love being tapped into the senses of life, you know, the frequencies and the wavelengths that are going. I love the wind. I love the smell of the ocean. I love the sounds of life around me. And I think when you're in tune to them, that attunement is something that you are sensory tapped with, which then centrally, it keeps you at a higher plane automatically.
Well, you know, you express something that's vital. We all need to be out in nature. Now, you may not be able to get near the ocean. I moved from Toronto so that I would be near the ocean.
Me too, Toronto to Victoria. Too goddamn cold in Toronto.
Yes, it is. So being in water will help to soothe your soul. Being out in trees, being outside, walking in nature on a daily basis. All of these things that you know, we are sensory beings. And the universe is interactive if we choose to interact with it. You know, I can be thought of as a bit of a crazy person. I talk to the ocean and the trees and the
trees, and they talk back to me.
And they do. And see, that's the thing, is that if you interact with them, it comes right back to you.
We've got to get over this ignorance and arrogance that our language is the only language. And, you know, the thing about language is the trees and the rustle and the frequency and the vibration in which they speak to you is speaking to you. It's translating in your psyche. Maybe your brain hasn't caught up yet exactly what it means, but that's part of the knowingness. The knowingness that comes from the soul, the heart to the spirit, for your mind to know what it needs to know when it needs to know it. And you'll have clarity when you can come back from a walk and you don't know how you've got this clarity. It's because nature has spoken to you. And it's reset you, giving you the answers that you seek. And we don't need to kind of, well, I need to understand this. No, you don't. You just need to accept it. You're in tune. The other thing is you're surrounded by animals right now. Animals are the most incredibly sensory creatures that know who you are. They connect with you first and foremost at the heart and the soul. They lift your spirit. They calm your mind. And they just, their sheer presence when you hold them on your lap or holding them, of how they can completely fulfill your sensory. So if you're not in around nature, get an animal.
I agree.
I don't have one right now, which So I cost other people's animals as I go out elsewhere. Excuse me, I've had a cold lately, so still there. I think also, we talked a lot about orgasm, and we look at orgasm as purely being a sexual thing. But I think that when you're in a state of joy and a state of euphoric from just being happy, that is orgasmic. You're in an orgasm. But we all think that it has to be a genital orgasm and not an euphoric orgasm. We can have orgasms without sexual encounters.
Well, and when you get to the last chapter of this book, and in an audio form, it's all narrated in my voice. The very last chapter talks about orgasmic bliss in life on a daily basis, living an orgasmic life, and it is possible. And once you're there, everything is blissful.
Yeah, I love what you said about when you were recording these audios where the producer actually had to ask you to stop. He needed to go home and make love to his wife.
He told me in that session that he became a G-spot expert.
Ah, well, there you go, you see. And if you are willing to listen, you are willing to learn, right? And isn't that actually something that's really, really, really predominant in everything in life? It's listen to each other. Sometimes it's not the words. The words just can't get it out. Sometimes just listen to the heart. Listen to the spirit. Listen to the tears. Or listen to the frustration. Again, listening to nature. If we just stopped thinking that everything had to be in our language and understand the attunement of all the other languages and learn to listen, we would actually understand with so much more clarity and trust. And then we would just get on and do it instead of worrying about it. The inner dialogue can talk us out of anything, can't it?
Yes, it can. And when you're laying there in bed thinking of saying no, talk to yourself and say, I know that I could be receiving pleasure.
Yeah.
Saying yes opens doors where saying no closes them.
Yes. Yes. Most certainly. And you know what? You may be pissed off with them at the time. Now, there's a different, if you're at a disconnect level where you just don't feel loved, valued, or you feel there's an abuse, that's a totally different level. But if you've just, been disconnected or mad at each other and you can't even remember what you're mad at, make love. Then talk about it and you realize, really, was it a big issue? Really, was it the issue? Or was it something else that happened at the grocery store and you're taking it out on your spouse, right? So it's make love, not war, right? Now, you've got some other books here that I want to have a quick word about. You've got Sacred Relationships. It's All Bullshit, which I'd love to know what that is about. And of course, The Orgasm for Life. So how about...
There's one other, actually.
Oh, there is? Okay, I don't have that one.
Odyssey, Victim to Victory was the first book I wrote. And it's a memoir, the story of my awakening and how I healed all of those things. It walks you through how that all happened. Orgasm for Life was the second book. It's All Bullshit. It's going to be out in audio, paperback, as well as an ebook in the next month. It is a book to heal depression and anxiety. And the audiobook is really powerful. The last 4 tracks are healing. And when you listen to it, it's going to give you this aha moment in that I had no idea, and it just makes so much sense. It was channeled, and the channel that comes through is very clear. The information in that book, it's quite lighthearted and a very quick read, because I feel like people that have depression and anxiety really have a hard time focusing. So tried to make it as quick and easy as possible. It's not a huge book.
And, sometimes we needed something with a little humor, don't we, in order to kind of, otherwise it's too much of a downer. I already know I feel like that. But you need something that kind of lightens you up.
Yes.
Because in that lightened vibration, you can see things more clearly.
Yeah. In the audiobook of that version of It's All Bullshit, there are 4 tracks that are healing. They heal guilt and shame, worry, a depression 1 and depression 2. Depression 2 is for people that have deep depression with suicidal ideation. And it's been my sense that people that have had past lives where they ended it through suicide, that they've come back this time to have that cleared out of their field.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge one on the past life DNA that gets passed down to us, as well as, of course, we've got our genetic DNA too. And that if we do not clear those past lives, those imprints are constantly going to go with us. And then we get confused. You know, why do I feel this way? This shouldn't relate to my life. And it almost feels schizophrenic, the different type of lives that you're living. And when you understand it's the past life that's still imprinted on you, and you can release that, now you can start taking control over your own life, because you know which life it is you're living.
Very true. It's very true. Yeah.
And humor is something I think we all need in our lives, because we are inclined to all take things far too seriously, aren't we? And I think our own presence, especially I think more in the 30, 40 years, consumerism is being pushed. You need more, you've got to have more to be more, the way you look, nobody's going to love you unless you look like this, unless you do this, unless you're that. And we've bought into this load of crap. And we've got these mixed messages that will only be loved if that. Well, again, if you step into your own love vibration and you resonate and vibrate that out, you'll find people loving you for you, because it is an inside job, not an outside job.
So you must have read my book, It's All Bullshit, because
I will definitely.
in essence, that's what it's. We've been fed a load of crap to make us think that these certain things are going to bring us happiness, and then when we do all them, and we don't have happiness, and we wonder what the heck, or something else.
Yeah, well, I was doing it all right, but no, you've got to understand the system is wrong.
Right.
Exactly. When you're in tuned with your divine guidance, whatever you want to call it, and you are in tuned with your senses and nature, you are riding that beautiful wave, and it will lead you where you need to go. And so often we're trying to push against the wind instead of going with the wind.
With it. Life can be a lot easier when we just walk in the flow.
Yeah.
And then we find it's a beautiful life, and things become so much easier.
Yes.
Absolutely right. Instead of salmon swimming upstream against the current,
we're
going with it.
Why do we want to choose to make life so much harder? We don't need that.
No, we don't.
And I've got on the cosmic order at the present moment to meet someone, because I'm ready. I'm tired of being single. I'd like to have somebody in my life. It doesn't have to be full-time, but somebody in my life will be nice. And it's, for me, being the cosmic being, it's all about, I'm putting out that vibration. It happened last time, doing it this time, when the time is right, I'll meet that frequency, because that's for me. As you said, a woman needs to be made love to the brain. Well, for me, it's, you've got to make love to my soul first before you can get anywhere else.
We have to be on the same page.
I have to be in the sync. Yes. Otherwise, the touch it doesn't feel anything. When it's that touch with the right frequency, oh my God, transcending. You have no idea how far the body can go, when that right touch is there.
I
have experienced it. And it's
I
nice to
have
have it back.
something I'd like to share. It's kind of a secret. So we have this tendency, to think, that sex and making love should be fast and furious, kind of like this, right? And so one of the things that I've discovered along the way was something I call static kissing. And it's best done on a couch where one of you has the back of the couch as like a backstop, but you just hold one another, and you can do some eye gazing, looking into each other's eyes for a bit, as long as you can stand it. And then when you allow yourselves to come close enough to kiss very slowly, hold your lips still, so that your lips are touching one another, but you're not moving.
And not devouring each other.
No, you just hold one another in this static place, breathing each other's breath. and do that and then slowly build the kissing.
Mm.
But you're going to find that passion comes from such a deep resource that you didn't know was there.
It's putting you in sync too, isn't it? Yeah,
You're breathing one another's breath,
yeah,
you are becoming in sync with one another.
right.
Absolutely.
And then you ride that wave together. Woo! Yes.
Oh yes.
Nothing better.
Time
Let's
for
go.
a cold shower now.
Yeah. Drat's being single. Sacred relationship still is about that one.
So that one is it's a series of my best blog articles. I had a I still do have this blog where has I don't know, over a million hits on that blog, and certain articles were really well loved, and so I put them into a book so that you could have the book as a resource, and there's guidance on how to flow through your relationship, how to connect in a sacred way, creating sacred sex as opposed to something disconnected. And that's what it's all about, is creating the sacredness in the relationship between two people.
And you need to be in a sacred space in your own life. You in order to have that sacred relationship, you have to bring your sacral to the table. So that means you've got to do the journey.
Right. So,
And
so in my life, I do Kundalini yoga, and I do it every day. I do a meditation. I have yoga practice. I do that every day. It raises my vibration. It keeps my energy field clear, and it keeps me very grounded in my body. And so when we are, because I've had sex where I was disconnected and it wasn't the same. So
yeah,
when you're disassociated, you don't experience the magnitude of the connection. But so being grounded in your body creates a very deep connection for an exquisite experience.
we don't want to fornicate, we want to make love.
Exactly.
And making love it transcends the orgasm. The whole experience is the orgasm, and it's one that it's like a beautiful stepping into a beautiful skin that will last you for days, because every time you think about it, the tingle and the whole feeling is there again, because it just keeps going. So it's not something you got to do again the next day. It's just something that really stays with you, though of course you get hungry for more.
At the time of orgasm, there were 200 people were examined in a what's the one that goes around? Is that the CAT scan? Um,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
the magnetron
Yeah.
thing. Okay, so they were examined at the time of orgasm, and 80 centers of the brain light up. An orgasm is the only experience a human can have where 80 centers of the brain are ignited all at the same time. It is a brush with God. It's a
Yeah.
brush with the creator and the universe. It
Yeah.
is the greatest experience a human can have. So, you can understand why women who are not having orgasms don't want to have sex. So
Right.
we've got to get these women into the game and allow them to be able to experience this exquisite, amazing. It's not just a moment.
Yeah.
This.
And the permission that if you are on your own, or your partner's not there, to make love to yourself. A lot of people are embarrassed about it, or I don't know how to touch, or don't have that fantasy, of you can start even with the fantasy of remembering the touch and how you feel, and that in your mind is already, the erotica is already coming out. There's so many different ways that you can have that orgasm for yourself. Obviously it's so much nicer when you're doing it with someone, but
Absolutely.
but it's you can still bring pleasure to yourself. And it's love is the best medicine. But when that love is united in such a way that it brings you so euphoric, and it collects all those senses off, it is such a bonding of connection that is absolutely beautiful. With each other. But I think the transcendence of self, of discovery of who you are in that moment, is something that's so incredibly enlightening.
If we were not meant to masturbate, our sexual parts would have been unreachable with our,
Yeah.
and they are not. They are easily within reach.
Yeah. 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 So don't be afraid of sex.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of your sensuality. You know, don't be afraid to ask or to guide your lover to what you want. Um, it is, for me, obviously imperative that I am on the level, um, soul, heart, where I feel that connection first before I can go there. Being the other way didn't work for me. So for me, this is why it's really important. So you've got to know what's important for you. What's important for you in your connection. But when you resonate it out, it's the ripple effect, isn't it? When you ripple that out, the beacons go off, and then somebody that's on that wavelength is going to be attracted to you, whether it's your partner or somebody you haven't met yet. So we've just got to be willing to step into that sensuality without fear, and just look upon it as another form of communication and language.
Absolutely. Whatever we radiate from our heart,
Yeah.
this is what people feel. It may be invisible, but others experience what's in your heart.
I'm also going to add this. Right now, this planet's in trouble physically. It is breaking up, and the core is in danger. And that is because of all the negative vibration that is being fed, not only what we're doing to it on the planet, but what we've been doing, sending to it with the negative vibration. It is imperative that we raise up to that higher frequency of love, that higher frequency of that crescendo ignitement, because that is what's going to stabilize this actual planet. So look upon making love as also saving our planet.
I like that. That's beautiful.
It's all up to us, isn't it? In our own lives, we're our own solution, and we're also the solution to the planet and to each other.
Yes, absolutely. John Lennon had it right.
Yes. Yes. That's why we still love listening to him. Okay. How do people get hold of you? How
My
do people get hold of your books?
my website is jenniferelizabethmasters.com. My books are available on Amazon, and you can just put in Jennifer Elizabeth Masters books on Amazon and they will come up. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. You can send me an email at jenniferelizabethmasters@gmail.com.
You also are on LinkedIn,
LinkedIn.
and you've also got a YouTube.
I do. I have 2 YouTube channels and plenty of YouTube videos there. If you
Excellent.
click on the videos, hundreds will show up.
So it's just be willing to explore. Maybe you've had a bad experience. You know, maybe you're feeling disconnected with yourself right now, with your partner. You know, it's just be willing to do the self-exploration of, you know, of what is in my way. Is it depression? How do I get rid of that? How do I feel connected? How do I raise my vibration? How do I raise my own sensuality? You've got all the tools there. So just reach out to jenniferelizabethmasters.com, and just $37 for all those tapes. I mean, it's whether you think you're depressed or anxious or not, I'm sure you are, because it's the state that everybody's in right now, and you would benefit from it. And most certainly the bullshit book, most certainly. I mean, that's something that should be on the coffee table, because we have got to taking ourselves so seriously, but we've also become so flippant with things that matter, and that needs to change. So lighten up, and when you do and step into that other vibration, we're not going to make so many faux pas. We're not going to be so disregarding of other people, because we're coming from a place of love. And when you come from a place of love, you treat people with love, and that's what we all need in the world. So thank you, Jennifer. This was wonderful and very, very enlightening.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. I appreciate you.
And as I do you with everything that you're doing, everything that you've overcome. And you know what? Life is orgasmic. You know, and orgasms aren't a dirty word. And it is something that we need to have. Remember, you're saving the planet with every good orgasm. All right? And you're raising up that vibration, and you're having a connection that is just beyond words. So don't be afraid of the orgasm, and don't be afraid to be you, because we need you. So thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Sarah.
And to everyone else out there, happy orgasming. Bye for now.
We hope that you enjoyed the show and were inspired. Come and visit us at selfdiscoverymedia.com and see what other shows we have for you. And please do visit our selfdiscoverycommunity.org and see how you can be a part of giving back. Thank you very much.